The Academy's training hall looked like a battlefield even before the fight began. Tall alien cadets, armored and strong, stood in rows, their shining blades waiting on the instructor's table. The air smelled of metal, oil, and dust. Everyone's eyes glowed with pride, except for one. At the far edge, half hidden in the shadow of the wall, sat a human girl. She was smaller than everyone else, her uniform loose on her frame, her shoulders tight with nerves. The alien cadets towered over her, some with scaled skin that shimmered under the lights, some with armored arms as thick as stone, some with sharp tusks jutting from their jaws. She looked nothing like them. In her place, she saw no weapon. No blade, no staff, nothing but a broken chair shoved against the wall. One of its legs was lying on the ground, cracked and jagged. The instructor entered. He was taller than all of them, his skin dark as steel, his eyes glowing yellow like two burning suns. His presence made the room silent. With slow, careful movements, he placed polished blades on the long table. Their edges caught the light, throwing bright lines across the hall. "Today," he said, his deep voice rolling like thunder, "you will prove who deserves to be a warrior. Strength alone will not save you. Fear will not guide you. Only willpower will decide who stands." The cadets stepped forward, one by one, each lifting a weapon with pride. Their claws wrapped around hilts, their fangs bared in excitement. Sparks of competition flared in their eyes. They were ready, but the human girl still sat empty-handed. The table was bare. Whispers started. A long-necked alien snickered. "No blade for her?" Another muttered, "She'll last seconds." A deep voice added, "Why is a fragile human even here?" The laughter grew, filling the hall. She heard it all, but she didn't turn away. Instead, she bent down slowly, picked up the chair leg, and held it tight. The wood was rough, splinters digging into her palm. It felt useless compared to the glowing blades. Yet in her hands, it became something more. The instructor's gaze settled on her. He had placed no weapon in her spot for a reason. Would she crumble under shame? Or would she find her own way? Now he had his answer. She had chosen. "Begin!" the instructor roared. The hall exploded with noise. Blades clashed against blades, the sound of steel ringing like thunder. The ground shook as armored bodies crashed together. The cadets shouted with rage and pride, their voices mixing into a storm. The human girl stood frozen for a heartbeat, her chair leg pressed against her chest. Her heart pounded so hard it drowned the noise. Fear threatened to crush her, but another voice inside whispered, "Do not fall. Not here." One cadet noticed her stillness and grinned. His skin glowed with blue scales, and in his hand was a blade longer than her arm. "A stick against me?" he laughed. He charged, swinging his weapon in a wide arc meant to end her fight before it began. She moved, quick. She ducked low, the blade cutting the air just above her head. The wind of the strike brushed her hair. Before the cadet could turn, she struck. The chair leg slammed against his wrist with a dull crack. His hand shook, his blade slipped, and it clattered to the floor. Gasps filled the room. Every eye turned toward her. A human, armed with nothing but broken wood, had disarmed an alien cadet in the first seconds of the fight. Her grip tightened. She didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She only lifted the chair leg again, her eyes fixed forward. Another cadet stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. He slashed fast, his blade sparking against the floor. She rolled to the side, the edge missing by inches. Her counter was simple, a strike to his knee. He stumbled, growling in rage. She moved again before he could recover. Every move was instinct, raw and desperate, but it worked. The battle around her grew louder, but now half the cadets weren't watching their fights. They were watching her. The chair leg began to crack under the strain. Each strike left splinters, but she swung harder, faster, using every inch of it. Where the aliens relied on weapons, she relied on survival. She was smaller, weaker, but she was unpredictable. The instructor watched closely. His glowing eyes narrowed. He had seen thousands of cadets, thousands of fights, but none like this. This was not skill taught in drills. This was something deeper, something raw. Her weapon finally snapped in half. The jagged would cut her palm, but she didn't let go. She held the broken piece high, her chest heaving with breath. Around her, the whispers shifted again. She should be down already. How is she still moving? Humans. They are dangerous. The instructor raised his hand, and silence fell. Every blade lowered. The human girl stood in the center of the hall, sweat on her face, blood on her hand, and the shattered chair leg raised like a blade. The instructor's voice broke the silence. This, he said slowly, is why humanity cannot be ignored. In that moment, every cadet knew something had changed. A broken chair leg had spoken louder than the sharpest blade. The silence in the training hall did not last long. The sound of blades clashing soon filled the space again, echoing like storms against metal walls. Every cadet fought to prove strength. But now, many eyes shifted toward the small human girl standing with nothing but a broken piece of wood in her hand. She had already surprised them once by disarming a scaled cadet. That shock still lingered, but the others were not ready to admit defeat. To them, it was only luck. They believed the next strike would break her spirit completely. One cadet, broad-shouldered with glowing tusks, stepped forward. His blade hummed as it cut the air, glowing faintly with energy. He pointed it toward her. "One hit and you are finished," he said, his voice sharp. The girl did not answer. Her breath was heavy. Her palms still stung from the splinters, but her eyes stayed steady. She tightened her grip on the wooden leg, the jagged edges pressing deeper into her skin. The instructor gave no signal. He only watched, his arms folded, waiting to see what would happen next. The tusked cadet charged with surprising speed. His blade came down like lightning, a strike that could have ended any normal fight. But the girl was already moving. She sidestepped, the blade missing by inches, and swung her chair leg across his ribs. The sound was not sharp like steel, it was dull, wooden, and raw. Yet it made him stumble. Gasps echoed again. The cadet roared and slashed again, faster, harder, his tusks flashing under the light. The human ducked low, rolled across the floor, and hit his leg with the splintered wood. The cadet collapsed to one knee, rage twisting his face. He swung wildly, but she was gone again, sliding back with breathless speed. The crowd grew restless. Some shouted encouragement to their fellow cadet, but others whispered nervously. It no longer looked like luck. The girl fought with no weapon of honor, yet she made every move count. Another cadet joined the fight, unwilling to let the human's defiance grow further. This one was taller, with 4 arms, each holding a short blade. His confidence radiated like fire. "You cannot fight us all," he growled. The human girl glanced at him, then at the tusked warrior still kneeling, and she made her choice. Instead of backing away, she rushed forward. Her broken chair leg struck the tusked cadet's wrist again, forcing him to drop his blade. Without pausing, she scooped it up with her free hand. The hall froze. For the first time, she held real steel. Her grip was unsure, the weight heavy compared to the wooden stick she had trusted moments before. But her eyes sharpened, and she lifted the blade as though it had belonged to her all along. The 4-armed cadet roared in anger and came at her with a storm of strikes. Blades clashed in rapid rhythm, sparks flying in the air. Each strike pressed her back, her arms straining, her breath quickening. She blocked, deflected, and parried, but she was being pushed closer to the wall. The spectators leaned forward, certain the human girl's fight would end now. She was outnumbered, outmatched, and exhausted. But then something changed. She let go of the blade. The crowd gasped as it clattered to the floor, and for a moment, it looked like surrender. But in that heartbeat of confusion, she struck with her broken chair leg again. Straight and sharp, it caught the 4-armed cadet on the jaw. He staggered back, stunned, and she used the distraction to kick his knee. He fell hard, his blade scattering. Silence filled the hall. She stood there, sweaty, shaking, but unbroken. The wooden chair leg, cracked and bleeding with splinters, was still in her hand. She had chosen it over steel, not because it was stronger, but because it was hers. The instructor's eyes gleamed with faint amusement. He understood what many cadets could not. This human girl was not relying on the weapon at all. She was relying on herself. The weapon, broken or sharp, was only an extension of her will. But the fight was not over. A group of cadets surrounded her now, anger burning in their eyes. Their pride was wounded, and they wanted to crush the human spirit before it spread further. Blades rose high, forming a deadly circle around her. The girl turned slowly, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Every side was blocked, every escape closed. The broken chair leg felt lighter now, almost useless. She tightened her grip, her knuckles white, and her mind raced. For a moment, fear tried to take her. She could feel it clawing inside her chest, telling her to stop, to give up. But she remembered the laughter when they thought she was weak, the whispers that she did not belong, and something stronger rose inside. She raised the chair leg. Her voice, though quiet, carried across the hall. Come then. The circle tightened, and in that instant the training hall no longer felt like practice. Felt like survival. The clash began again, louder, harsher. The girl moved like fire in a storm, dodging, rolling, striking whenever she found the smallest opening. Every blow she landed was not just wood against armor, it was defiance against everything they believed. And for the first time, some of the cadets watching began to wonder if they were seeing the birth of something greater than a test. The circle of cadets around the human girl began to loosen. She stood in the middle, her shoulders rising and falling with heavy breaths, her hair damp with sweat, the broken chair leg still clutched in her hand. What had started as laughter now shifted into silence. The room felt different. The air was heavier. The whispers that once mocked her began to change tone. She's still standing. She should have fallen already. Humans. Maybe they are not weak. Those words rippled through the hall. The human girl heard them, but she did not let them slow her. Her eyes stayed sharp, scanning the floor, watching every movement around her. She could see the anger growing in the other cadets, the pride in them that refused to accept what they were witnessing. One cadet, taller than all the rest, stepped forward. His skin glowed like molten rock, heat rising from his arms. He was one of the strongest in the class, and he had been silent until now. He looked at her with disdain. You fight like an animal with scraps. Let me end this shame. He lifted his glowing blade, heat distorting the air around it. The human girl knew she could not face him with strength. His strikes would break her in two. But she did not back away. Instead, she shifted her feet, lowering her stance, holding the chair leg across her chest like a shield. He came at her with terrifying speed. The blade hissed as it cut through the air. She dodged, rolling across the floor, the heat scorching her skin as it passed by. The crowd roared. She turned on her knee and swung her chair leg low, striking the side of his ankle. The sound was sharp, the wood cracking again, but it made him stagger. Gasps spread through the hall. Even the strongest could be shaken. The molten-skinned cadet roared in fury and swung again, faster, his strikes raining down like fire. She moved back, ducking, twisting, the splinters of her weapon biting into her hand. Every near miss burned the air around her, yet she refused to fall. The crowd leaned forward, their eyes wide. This was no longer mockery. It was fear that she might actually win. Two more cadets stepped in, trying to corner her while the molten warrior pressed forward. Their blades gleamed under the lights, and together they aimed to overwhelm her. The hall filled with the sound of steel against wood, strikes landing from all sides. She blocked one, ducked another, and slid between their legs in a desperate move. Her chair leg caught the knee of one cadet as she slipped past, sending him sprawling. She used his fall as cover, spinning behind him and facing the others again. Her chest ached from the effort, her lungs burning, but her eyes never lost focus. The crowd erupted in noise, half shocked, half angry. No one had ever seen a fight like this in the academy. Cadets who had trained with perfect blades for years were being pushed back by a fragile human with nothing but broken wood. The whispers grew darker. She's making fools of us. If she wins, what does that say about us? Stop her. Now. Pride turned to desperation. 3 more cadets charged together, blades flashing in a deadly rhythm. The human girl's arms trembled as she blocked and dodged, her chair leg cracking further with each impact. The wood finally split in half, leaving only a jagged shard in her grip. The audience gasped, certain it was the end. But instead of fear, she smiled. The shard was smaller, lighter, sharper at the edge. She spun with sudden speed, striking the wrist of one cadet, then turning to jab the side of another's neck. Both stumbled back, their blades slipping. The last one hesitated, shocked by her sudden burst of ferocity. That single moment of hesitation was enough. She lunged forward, pressing the shard to his throat. Silence fell again. The cadet froze, his eyes wide. She could have ended it, but she didn't. She simply lowered her weapon and stepped back, her breathing heavy. The crowd did not laugh anymore. Their mocking words had turned into uneasy whispers. They were not looking at her as prey anymore. They were looking at her as a predator. The molten-skinned warrior stepped forward again, his pride wounded beyond repair. He raised his burning blade high, but before he could strike, the instructor's voice cut through the hall. Enough! Every blade lowered at once. The molten warrior froze, his chest heaving with rage, but he obeyed. The instructor stepped forward slowly, his glowing eyes fixed on the human girl. His footsteps echoed across the silent room. He stopped in front of her, towering over her small frame. The crowd waited, unsure if he would punish her or praise her. The instructor looked at the shattered wood in her hand, then back at her face. His voice rumbled deep. You turned weakness into strength. You faced more than weapons. You faced doubt, mockery, and pride. And still you stand. The cadets looked at one another uneasily. The words cut deeper than any blade. The instructor's eyes narrowed, and he spoke louder, his voice carrying across the hall. Remember this day. Remember the human who fought with nothing but a broken chair leg. For she has carved fear into your hearts, and fear is the beginning of respect. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time, the cadets were not laughing at her. They were watching her with something far more dangerous than mockery, wariness. And the girl, though trembling and exhausted, understood something powerful in that moment. She had not just survived. She had changed the way they saw her. The hall was still ringing from the instructor's command of enough. Yet the air was restless, filled with tension. The cadets, who once laughed loudly at the fragile human, now avoided meeting her eyes. Some looked angry, some confused, and some quietly unsettled. But the instructor did not end the test. He only paused it. His glowing eyes studied the girl carefully. He saw her shoulders rising with each heavy breath, her hands bloodied by splinters, and her weapon, a splintered shard of wood hanging loosely by her side. Most would think she was at her limit, but he knew better. For years, he had trained warriors from across the galaxy. He had seen pride, arrogance, strength, and talent. But rarely had he seen what now stood before him. She was fighting with something that could not be forged in fire or polished on steel. She fought with will. The instructor folded his arms behind his back and spoke slowly, his voice echoing across the room. The test continues. The fight is not over. Gasps spread through the cadets. Many had hoped he would end it. Their pride was already wounded, their fear growing. But the instructor's word was law. The human girl raised her head. She didn't argue. She didn't even flinch. She simply tightened her grip on the broken shard and straightened her back. The cadets around her exchanged nervous glances. Their laughter from earlier felt like a memory from another life. One cadet, with green skin patterned like sharp scales, stepped forward. He was tall, his movements slow and deliberate. His blade was long, humming with faint energy. He pointed it at her chest. This ends now, he growled. The girl's heartbeat thundered in her ears, but her eyes never left his. She waited. The scaled cadet lunged, his blade cutting a deadly arc through the air. The girl darted sideways, her feet light, and struck his wrist with her shard. The blade wavered but did not fall. He pushed forward again, pressing her toward the edge of the hall. The instructor's eyes narrowed. He noticed how she didn't fight with raw power. She used space, angles, and timing. She moved when she had to, waited when she needed, and struck only at the right moment. Even in exhaustion, her mind stayed sharp. Another cadet joined, this one smaller but faster, his twin blades flashing like silver. The girl now faced two opponents, their weapons weaving together in a deadly rhythm. Sparks flew as blades cut against the floor, their strikes barely missing her by inches. The crowd roared, some cheering for the cadets, others watching in silence, waiting to see the outcome. The girl stumbled once, her foot slipping on the smooth floor, and the smaller cadet almost caught her shoulder. The blade grazed her sleeve, tearing the fabric. A murmur rippled through the hall, but instead of retreating, she surged forward. Her shard struck the scaled cadet's jaw with surprising force. He staggered back, his blade dropping low. She spun quickly, ducked under the smaller cadet's strike, and jabbed her shard into his ribs. Both of them fell back, stunned. The instructor's lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but into a look of recognition. He had seen this before, not in humans but in survivors of wars. The way she turned weakness into a weapon, failure into momentum. This was not training, it was instinct carved by struggle. The crowd began to shift uneasily again. She keeps finding a way. She should have been crushed already. Why does she not give up? The human girl stood with her chest heaving, the shard trembling in her hand. She looked around the hall at the circle of enemies waiting. Her arms ached, her body screamed, but her spirit remained unbroken. The instructor finally stepped forward, his voice deep. You fight against them all, yet you stand. But what will you do when strength fades? His question echoed. For a moment, the girl felt the weight of it. She was tired, nearly at her limit. Every muscle in her body begged her to stop. But then she remembered the voices from earlier, the cruel laughter, the mocking words that said she didn't belong. She remembered the looks of doubt, the whispers of weakness, and that memory ignited her again. She raised the shard higher, her voice shaking but firm. I fight until I cannot stand. The hall went silent. Even the cadets, who had been preparing to attack again, froze at her words. The instructor's glowing eyes studied her closely. He saw her weakness, yes, but beyond it he saw something greater. Something that no alien blade, no alien training could teach. He turned to the cadets. His voice boomed like thunder. Look at her. She bleeds. She trembles. She holds nothing but broken wood. And yet, she stands against you all. Ask yourselves, warriors, why you fear her. The cadets lowered their blades slightly. Some looked away in shame. Others clenched their jaws in anger. None of them laughed now. The instructor walked past the girl, circling slowly, his eyes never leaving her. He was not testing her weapon anymore. He was testing the heart that guided it. And what he saw both intrigued and unsettled him. Finally, he stopped and gave a single command. Again. The cadets hesitated. None moved at first. Their pride battled their fear. But slowly 2 stepped forward, then 3. The fight was far from over. The girl straightened her back once more. Her breath was shallow, her hand bleeding, but her eyes burned brighter than ever. She lifted the shard. And the instructor, watching closely, knew the real test was only just beginning. The hall grew louder again as 3 more cadets stepped forward. Their faces were hard, their pride burning. The human girl stood at the center, her chest rising fast, her shard of wood trembling in her hand. Every part of her body screamed with exhaustion, yet her eyes did not lose their fire. The instructor remained still, his arms behind his back. He was not watching the cadets anymore. He was watching her. The first cadet attacked, his blade cutting down in a sharp arc. She raised her shard, blocking clumsily. The wood cracked under the pressure, but she twisted her body at the same time, letting the strike slide off to the side. Pain shot through her arms, but she did not let go. The second cadet rushed from behind, his blade aiming for her back. She dropped low at the last second, rolling forward. The blade missed, cutting through only air. She rose quickly, sweat dripping into her eyes, and slammed her shard into his knee. He shouted in pain, stumbling back. The crowd erupted in mixed voices. Some shouted for her to fall, others whispered in disbelief. The laughter was gone. The fight had turned into something none of them had expected. The third cadet, larger than the others, swung his blade with brutal force. The girl blocked, but the impact sent her flying back. She hit the floor hard, her shard skidding away across the hall. A wave of relief spread through the cadets watching. "It's over," one muttered. "Finally." But it was not over. The girl pushed herself up slowly, her arms shaking. Blood ran from her scraped palms, and her legs wobbled beneath her. She could barely breathe, but she stood. She staggered toward the shard, picked it up, and raised it again. Her body looked ready to collapse, but her spirit told a different story. The instructor's eyes narrowed. This was the moment he had been waiting for. When strength failed, when the body broke down, what would she do? Another cadet attacked, his blade swinging fast. The girl barely dodged, the edge grazing her side. Pain tore through her body, yet she didn't cry out. Instead, she used the momentum of her stumble to roll forward and jab her shard into his ribs. He fell with a gasp. The audience went silent for a moment. It was not just her fighting now. It was something else, something deeper. Her movements were no longer perfect. She stumbled often. She fell. She gasped for air. But every time she fell, she rose again. Every time her weapon cracked, she made it work. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. The instructor finally spoke, his deep voice echoing. "Do you see? She fights beyond her limit. This is what makes her dangerous." The cadets froze, their blades lowering slightly. His words cut deeper than any wound. Dangerous. The very word that had never been linked with humans now burned in their ears. The girl could hear nothing but the pounding of her own heart. Her muscles screamed. Her vision blurred. She felt as if the next step might break her body completely. But she pushed forward anyway. The large cadet returned, his face twisted in rage. He swung again, this time aiming to end it once and for all. She raised her shard, but it splintered in half under the blow. The force sent her staggering, almost falling. The crowd gasped, believing the fight finished. But in that split second, she grabbed one of the broken pieces and thrust it forward. The sharp end struck the cadet's chest, not piercing flesh, but knocking him off balance. He crashed to the ground with a heavy thud. The hall erupted in shock. She dropped the shard, her hands empty now. Her whole body trembled, her breath ragged. She looked like she had nothing left. Yet she still raised her fists. Empty, bleeding, but ready. The cadets who had mocked her now hesitated. None of them rushed forward. Their eyes no longer saw weakness. They saw something terrifying. Someone who would not stop, no matter how broken, no matter how exhausted. The instructor's voice thundered. "This is why she is dangerous. Not the weapon, not the strength, the will, the refusal to fall." The cadets lowered their blades further, their pride cracking. The hall grew silent again. Even those who still wanted to fight could not move. They had seen enough. The girl's knees shook. Her vision darkened. She felt as though she might collapse, but she forced herself to take one more step forward. Then another. Every step echoed loudly in the silence. Finally, she raised her empty hand, as if holding an invisible weapon. Her voice came out quiet but strong. "I am not done." A shiver ran through the crowd. No one laughed. No one mocked. Instead, unease spread through them all. For the first time, they saw not a fragile human, but a warrior who refused to break. The instructor's glowing eyes studied her closely, and for the first time, there was a trace of respect in them. She had gone beyond her body's limit. She had broken the barrier that stopped most warriors. And she was still standing. The training hall was silent again, but this silence was heavier than before. It was not the silence of waiting. It was the silence of fear. The human girl stood in the center, her hands empty now. The broken shards of wood lay scattered on the floor around her. Her arms trembled, her uniform was torn, and blood streaked her palms. Yet her eyes still burned with the same fire. The cadets around her hesitated. These were warriors who had trained with the best weapons, who carried pride in their blood, who had mocked her at the beginning. Now they found themselves frozen, blades lowered. None dared step forward. The instructor's glowing eyes moved slowly across the hall, watching them all. He could see the doubt in their faces, the cracks in their confidence. His deep voice broke the silence. "Why do you wait? She is unarmed. End this test." The words struck the cadets like a whip. Their pride could not allow them to retreat. Slowly, two of them stepped forward, blades raised, though their hands shook. The girl raised her fists. Small, cut, and trembling, they looked weak compared to the shining blades. Yet the sight of her fists made the cadets uneasy. She had nothing, yet she looked as if she still believed she could win. The first cadet lunged. She ducked low, letting the blade sweep over her head. The second slashed from the side, and she rolled, the edge cutting through her sleeve but missing her flesh. She rose quickly and slammed her elbow into his chest. He stumbled back, shocked not by the force, but by her refusal to stop. Gasps echoed through the hall again. The girl's chest ached, her breath ragged, her legs weak. Each movement felt heavier than the last. But she fought not with strength, she fought with instinct and will. Every stumble turned into an opening, every failed block into a counter. She was no longer reacting. She was surviving in a way the cadets could not predict. The first cadet struck again, his blade aiming for her shoulder. She grabbed his wrist with both hands, twisting hard. The blade clattered to the floor, and before he could recover, she kicked his knee. He fell with a cry, clutching his leg. The second cadet froze. He stared at her, then at his fallen companion. For a moment, fear held him back. That moment was enough. The girl stepped forward, her fist striking his jaw. The sound was small, but the effect was large. He dropped to the floor, his blade slipping from his grip. The hall fell into silence once more. Now no cadet moved. Their eyes were wide, their pride shattered. A human girl, armed with nothing, had defeated them in front of their own instructor. The instructor stepped forward, his boots echoing against the floor. His tall frame cast a long shadow over the girl, but his eyes held no anger. Instead, there was respect. "Victory," he said in a low, firm voice. "From nothing." The cadets lowered their heads. Some clenched their fists in shame, others looked away. None dared speak. The girl stood in the center, her chest rising and falling, sweat dripping down her face. Her body was close to collapse, but she stayed on her feet. She looked at the shards of wood on the floor, the same broken piece that had carried her through the fight. She had carved her victory not with steel, but with spirit. The instructor turned to the others. His voice thundered through the hall. "Remember this day. You had blades. You had strength. You had training. She had nothing but will. And she has stood where you fell." The words cut deeper than any weapon. The cadets shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet his gaze. The instructor faced the girl again. "You did not just win a fight. You revealed the truth. A weapon does not give victory. The hand, the mind, the spirit, these decide the outcome." The girl said nothing. She was too tired, her breath still heavy, but her silence spoke louder than words. Slowly, the instructor raised her hand high. The hall filled with the sound of boots striking the floor as cadets saluted, though their faces showed defeat. They had no choice but to honor what they had seen. For the first time, the human girl was not seen as weak. She was seen as dangerous, as someone who could not be broken. And though the fight had ended, its memory would linger far longer than the sound of clashing blades. The story of the human who fought with nothing but a broken chair leg would spread across the academy like fire. Victory had been carved not from steel, but from nothing. The hall slowly emptied after the test. The cadets, still shaken, walked away in silence, their blades heavy in their hands. None of them spoke. None of them laughed. The pride they had carried into the hall was now cracked, replaced with something unfamiliar, respect mixed with fear. The human girl remained behind. She stood alone in the center of the hall, staring at the broken shards scattered around her feet. Her hands still bled, her arms still trembled, but she felt no shame. That broken chair leg had carried her through the impossible. It had been weak just like they thought she was. Yet together they had proved everyone wrong. The instructor stepped forward. His shadow fell across her, tall and commanding. His glowing eyes studied her quietly. For a long moment he said nothing, as though measuring the weight of what had happened. Finally, his deep voice broke the silence. You had no blade, yet you created one. You had no allies, yet you stood alone. You had no reason to be feared, yet now they fear you. The girl lifted her head, meeting his eyes. Her lips trembled, but she did not speak. She didn't need to. Her silence carried the truth. She had already said everything with her fight. The instructor bent down, picking up one of the broken shards. He held it between his large fingers, studying it as though it were a priceless artifact. This, he said slowly, is no weapon of steel, yet it will be remembered as one. He placed the shard back at her feet. Keep it. It belongs to you now. The girl bent down, picking up the splintered piece. It felt lighter than before, almost fragile, but in her hand it carried meaning far heavier than any blade. She nodded silently. Outside the hall, word began to spread quickly. Cadets whispered to each other in corridors. They spoke of the human girl who fought without a blade. They told the story of how she refused to fall, how she turned a broken chair leg into victory. At first, the whispers carried disbelief. But as the tale traveled further, it began to grow. She fought them all. She stood against blades with nothing. She carved victory from wood. In the days that followed, the whispers left the academy and reached beyond. Other students heard, then instructors, then outsiders who had no part in the training. By the end of the week, the story had reached nearby colonies. Soon, it became more than just a tale of survival, it became a legend. For the cadets, the memory was bitter. Every time they held their blades, they remembered the sound of wood striking against steel. Every time they practiced, they heard the echo of the instructor's voice reminding them of their fear. It haunted them, reshaping how they fought. Pride was no longer enough. They had seen willpower defeat strength. For the girl, life did not suddenly become easy. She still faced doubt, still endured whispers, still trained with hands that bled and arms that shook. But now, when they looked at her, it was not with mockery. It was with caution. Even those who hated her name did not underestimate her again. One evening, she sat outside the academy, the shard resting on her lap. The stars stretched wide above, glowing like silver fires. She thought about her fight, about the fear she had felt, about the exhaustion that nearly broke her. And she thought about why she had not given up. It was not only to prove herself. It was because deep inside, she knew humans could not survive by strength alone. They survived by refusing to surrender. The instructor's words stayed with her. The weapon does not give victory. The will does. Years later, cadets would still tell her story. Some spoke of it with pride, others with shame, but none denied it. The broken chair leg became a symbol. It was no longer seen as a piece of wood. It was remembered as the day weakness turned into power, the day a fragile human carved victory out of nothing. In the archives of the academy, her test was recorded. And in those records, one line was repeated again and again. She did not win with steel. She won with spirit. The girl never sought glory. She never claimed to be greater than anyone else. She only kept the shard with her, carrying it wherever she went. To her, it was not a weapon, not a trophy, but a reminder. A reminder that even when the world gives you nothing, you can still fight, still stand, still win. And so, the legacy of a broken chair leg outlived the sound of any blade. It became a tale carried across worlds, whispered among those who doubted humans, feared humans, or tried to understand them. She had begun as the weakest in the hall. but she ended as the one who could never again be ignored.